was getting another channel.
Okay.
Maybe they could kneel on their knees.
Yeah.
Oh, kneel down. And what they were like,
I buy them for $1. You buy them in January for $1.
really?
Yeah, don't you have those malls that have like stands where they sell like thousands of them?
365.
Yeah.
You got one of those bundled candles. And Finn didn't. You go up there and help.
Amazing.
Well, aren't they?
Rhea!
Hi.
Let's go.
They can play. We're on number 2, Henry, now, right?
Like you can read this stuff on the outside. 12, 22 that's there. 12, 20 ticket holders and go in this.
Constitutional Convention. That's not a document. Is it?
Well, no. That's what
Yeah. Jefferson Independence. That was the other document line. Probably needs a paper or something.
What?
They're going to tell us what happened here.
Wow.
Okay. I would go like this. Number 1. Here, Joe, you can write this. It's really long.
Look at these leaves coming down.
With Karen Andrews.
When? Last year?
No, I guess a couple of years ago when they came to Christmas.
Very long time. I got it. I did it. I got it. But that's wrong. Why? Because you can't have 8 and 7. I got it. Wait, what's 8 plus 5? So 9 has to go here.
You know what it is, Shadow?
I did it. I did it. I did it. I did it.
What's 14? Have to be a 1.
As late as 1895. So there's always some kind of government use going on in this building. However, around roughly 1815 or 1820, the United States has now got a little bit of history, 40 years, 50 years of history. People start to think of this building, people like you and me, as an important place. And they start to come, just like you guys today, to see it. See the building where the United States began. And they walk into that one room where all those big events happen. And people start to think of that room. We don't know who's the first one to say it. But they think of that room as Independence Hall. So that name, that idea started with just one room. And eventually, through the years, kind of translated out to the whole building. So our goal today, number 1, is to take care of the building. That's the scaffolding. We've been working on the bell tower part for about a year and a half now. We're almost done, not that it does your photographs any good today. But that's one of those things with a 275-year-old building, you got to always be kind of keeping up with it. Now, the other side of it, though, is when we walk through the building, our chief goal is to show it to you as close as we can to the way it used to look. You're confident. You look especially confident. Is he the one I need to ask the hard questions to? All right. They trust you. All right, here's the hard question. It's actually not that hard. What country were we a part of before the Revolutionary War? Britain, right. We had a king. King of England, King of Great Britain, whatever you want to call him. King George III was our king. Now, I'm going to ask you this. Is that okay if I ask him one? All right, he said it was fine. So, did we like King George III? Now, it's kind of a trick question, so before you answer, go ahead and think about that. Do we like King George III over here? That's what you meant to do, right? Like this? Yeah, we actually did. Now, we didn't eventually, you're right. Once that war started, we kind of didn't like the king so much anymore. But before the war, we actually liked King George III. Now, we don't expect to hear that. That's why I said it was kind of a trick question. And that's the thing. We were British. We liked being British. We felt like the British system of government was the best one in the history of the world. And King George III was actually a really popular king. Because think about this. Back then, before the... Okay, here's a tougher question for you guys. Anybody remember what country helped us during the Revolutionary War? France. But do you remember 10 years before the Revolutionary War, what country we were fighting a war against? France, right. So before the Revolutionary War, we didn't really like France very much. And King George III led Britain to a victory over France, which made all of North America British instead of maybe French. So everybody was pretty happy with King George III. But after that war, we have a new problem. You guys feel like answering a question for me too? Philadelphia, that's their first problem. Anybody know what their second problem was? Doesn't have to be you guys, but yes. Nah, they'd already done the boycotts before they wrote their letter. They did some more boycotts. But what happened around Boston in April of 1775? After the massacre. Now, something that you might have heard around the world. Lexington and Concord. So suddenly there's a battle, a war going on around Boston, right in the midst of when they'd written this letter and the king didn't answer it. So it's piled up on all these other things, there's this war going on in New England. And it all gets dropped in the lap of the Continental Congress. Okay, fellas, figure this out. And that's what they had to deal with when they walked into Independence Hall for the first time in May of 1775. So what I want to do, folks, is take you over to Independence Hall's main building. We're going to head out the opposite door. There will be a step down. So just be aware of that step as soon as you walk out the door. You're not looking up at the sky or anything. And then we got about 5 steps to get up to the front door. Make sure you bring everything with you that you...
Half an hour. Half an hour.
And listen to their very first case. So it does have a fair amount of history in and of itself. But what I wanted to touch on was sort of the idea that a courtroom represents, which is tied into the idea of what the Continental Congress decided they were fighting for. Because in 1775, they did write a declaration, and in fact, Thomas Jefferson was one of the guys that wrote it. But you don't need to particularly remember, it's called the Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms. But basically, it said we're fighting for our rights under British law. Essentially, that's what these guys decided that the war was all about. Because it's really up to the Continental Congress to figure that sort of thing out. So the rights they are worrying about, the best place I can tell you to look that information up, the corner would be New Hampshire. You work your way down the map to the southernmost state, in the southern end of the room, that would be Georgia in the back row. So that's our guess. That's how we think it works. We do know the president of the Continental Congress is up here on the dais. Secretary to the right. Let's see, what do I want to start with? Got scattered about. Those of you that are big fans of George Reed in Delaware, that's his walk. Don't ask me who the other one belongs to because I have no idea. But those two we know. So we do have a few things. Maybe you're going to have to wait for that one. So at any rate, one of the Virginians sitting in this room in 1775 was George Washington. And Washington at this point in his life was 43 years old. And of course, he's the man that they're going to choose to lead this brand new American army. And it's important because the war itself begins in the north. Ben Franklin signed a treaty with France, and the French agreed to help us in our war. Yes? No, that's the one at the end of the war, called the Treaty of Amity and Commerce. You don't have to remember that name. But that's the treaty where we get the French to help us. They're going to send us money and supplies, a small army, a navy. But for Britain, for you as the king, that's trouble. Because you're not worried about beating the United States, because you're pretty strong. But when you have to fight France, it's a whole different story. France wants to invade England, but they don't in the war, but they want to. They always want to. They're going to be fighting in Spain. They're going to be fighting in India, South Africa, the Caribbean. All over the world, there's going to be fighting between France and Britain. Which means the king can't send so many troops over here. Which means weight's coming off the shoulders of George Washington. Which means things turn around. The big victory comes in Yorktown, Virginia in 1781. The Peace Treaty of Paris is then signed by Ben Franklin and John Adams in 1783. And the war is over. And now the king has finally let us go. We declared our independence in 1776. We got it in 1783. And suddenly, we had a new problem. We had these 13 states. They all had their own constitutions. They all had their own armies. Most of them had their own navies. They all had their own money. So if you were living in Pennsylvania and you decided you wanted to go to New Jersey, well, they might not like your Pennsylvania money when you got to New Jersey. So there were all sorts of problems. This means natural enemies, and of course you're all saying Connecticut, of course. Well, that's who it was. Connecticut invaded Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania governor, I'm sure, sitting in the room going, really? Connecticut? It's 50 miles away saying they own the top of Pennsylvania? You know, so this is the kind of thing that was happening, and people realized as things got worse that what they needed to do was have another meeting. So in the summer of 1787, what we know as the Constitutional Convention was held in this room. A new group of men would basically invent our one and only national government. Windows, and they put staircases in through the windows, and you walked in, and there were two staircases coming through two windows, so there were two lines of people going by on either side of the coffin. And in between those two staircases was the Liberty Bell, and then next to the Liberty Bell was Abraham Lincoln. So in that one room, on that one day, sort of one of those times when in American history an awful lot came together. So that's to me one of the really neat times in the history of that room. So folks, again, feel free to take a visit to some of those other great parts of the block here. And if anyone has any questions, anything else I can tell you, please, happy to tell you whatever else.
Give up?
Three pieces of paper to it. They rotate the pages every 6 months. Pages 2 and 3 are up. If you would have been here January to February, it's January till June. Pages 1 and 4 were up, and you could have seen where George Washington found the typo and he wrote on his copy. Page 5 of the Constitution will be coming up, I guess, in January.
Just trying to give me a flat tire.
Who isn't?
I'm doing this and I'm gonna be a junior park
That's
ranger.
great. I see it.
Well, it's a Philly land and water retention.
And then Mike and I won't go in. Is that too risky?
What is that?
Is Posky going in?
I mean, we're trying to decide. I don't know.
Or we all just go and pay all the money.
The only thing we could possibly go back is the red bag. Right? Everything else is everybody's.
So Daniel Carroll of Maryland.
We should all pose like a statue.
Yeah, we should have done that.
Are we out now?
Yeah, we're going to a movie.